So I think that overall the session went in well. It was probably I've been through six regular sessions, and it by far and away was my favorite, uh, most productive session overall. Even though there are far fewer bills than there have been in I think 40 years, and that's uh, fewer acts that became law, bills that became law, than there were in nearly 50 years. So it was a very slow start to a session, and a very whirlwind end at the end. But in the final analysis, it was still a lot less activity on net for the whole session than there had been. And so I think there was a lot more focus on specific things, some big ticket items. And of course, my favorite overall issue that I have been working on for my entire time in the legislature, and really trying to focus in on that, school choice, empowering parents with their kids' education, really just an entire form of the entire educational educational system in the state of Arkansas, with literacy, a focus on getting teachers and administrators and everybody kind of, the tools they need, or the focus on making sure learning is really a high focus and a high priority for our state going forward in the future. I think that overall theme of the session, just in general, with the results of the Arkansas Learns Act coming out of that, my impression was the session was very good, very successful, and some huge policy wins for conservatives. So, I mean, there's always going to be a lot of things here and there, depending on who's focused on what things. I worked a lot on career. I was on the education committee, so I worked almost exclusively on education topics this session. That was where my I don't know, 90% of my time was focused on those types of issues. Now, I did work on a few other things as well, but so career and technical education, really getting students prepared for life and success in life with their industry certifications and career pathways. That was a huge, maybe unseen focus of the session that saw some very positive overall results, I think, or we will see overall positive results from the actions taken during the session. I think there was probably not near as much of a focus on healthcare as there was ago. Of course, my perspective on it 2 years ago, I was on the health committee, and we were coming out of a pandemic. There was a lot of stuff dealing with emergency powers and telehealth and stuff like that. So I think even if you had just a normal session related with health issues, it wouldn't have been near as busy or as impactful as coming off that last session. In at least in the focus of that last session was certainly public health, where this one was education. And so I think there were some really incredible things that happened that we don't really necessarily almost sort of, oh yeah, that happened too, as an afterthought. But if they'd happened in previous years, they were major policy victories that just sort of flew right through. And that has to do a lot with, we have a new governor, we have new leadership, we have a new legislature as far as the makeup of the bodies. And so, with those increasing super majorities that are conservative, Republican focus, things like tax cuts. I mean, people don't really, I don't, everybody knows that we did, Arkansas Learns in education, and we did stuff with criminal justice. We did stuff with tax cuts. And that sort of is, oh, those are the big things that happened. But to really drill down on some of that, just for instance, the tax cut proposal that became law, reducing the top income tax rate from 4.9% down to 4.7, doesn't sound like it's really that big of a thing, but that's $100 million worth of tax relief to Arkansas citizens that will go into that will stay in their pockets. It also reduced the corporate income tax rate from 5.3% down to 5.1%. Now, 0.2%, like I said, doesn't sound like a lot, but it is hugely impactful and will generate more economic activity and investment in the state of Arkansas. There was another piece of legislation that dealt with eliminating something called the throwback rule, where the state of Arkansas taxed Arkansas-based companies for stuff that they did in other states. If that state didn't tax to the same rate Arkansas did, we went ahead and taxed them. So it's a huge impediment for corporations or entities to invest in Arkansas, to have their headquarters here. And so by eliminating or we're phasing that out actually over 7 years, but will take note of that and begin considering Arkansas as, we've improved our economic environment quite significantly this session. And I think a lot of those things flew under the radar because of the huge focus on education, and then also on the criminal justice. The fact that we, have more truth in sentencing. Most people probably don't realize this unless you're in that arena of law, that we had what was called 1/6 and 1/4 crimes. So where you and I think somebody got sentenced to 20 years in prison for, if it was a 1/4 crime, they only served 5 of those. And so we have these massive sentences, but in reality, they're not really serving anywhere close to that time. Well, now in Arkansas, after this legislative session, beginning, I think, January 1 of 24, so next year, as these things start to phase in, we'll have 100% and 85% crimes. So basically, if you are, and these are serious crimes. I mean, like murder, first degree, those types of. If you get sentenced to that, you're going to serve all of it, or 85% of it, before you're eligible for parole. And so those are some major shifts that will have an incredible deterrent on criminal activity, because folks, before they might do something, but it's more of a slap on the wrist. Now, for you and me, if you serve a day in jail, that's going to be more than a slap on the wrist. It's a loss of our freedom. But when you're considering whether or not this crime is worth doing this or it's not, well, it's not really a huge thing. And that one of those things is that there's federal crimes and there were state crimes, and if someone was if they were getting arrested, they asked whether or not this was federal time or state time before. And if it was federal, if they're getting arrested under federal charges, federal time was 80%, generally speaking. So they would cry that they're going to go to prison for a long, long time. Now, if you're commit that in Arkansas, it doesn't matter if it's federal or state, you're going to be, there's consequences to it. And so I think that will have, it's not going to have any immediate impact. It's going to take some time for that to kind of matriculate out. But I would say that that's going to be a major deterrent for criminals activity to take place in the state of premeditated criminal activity to take place in the state of Arkansas. So those are some of the big things. There's probably a number of smaller things that you can always pick up and say, hey, we didn't get this done, or we didn't quite get this done to the extent of what we would like to. I kind of feel like the focus so intense on getting some of these huge victories, and we got so much done in some of the conservative policy area arenas that I find myself to be very satisfied with the end results of. I mean, there could have always been. I mean, there's a few things, especially when you get toward the end, that you run out of time with. There was a parental rights bill that didn't get through at the very end. There that had to deal with educational resources and stuff that Representative McAlinden was running. Um, uh, we just ran out of time trying to get it finalized. Um, there was, of course, the affirmative action repeal. Uh, uh, that piece of legislation, I mean, it probably maybe some more work. It certainly needed more uh, uh, votes in order to get through the House. I think it didn't even get 30 out of 100 there. So there were some things that probably could have happened with a little bit more time. I think the short-term rental issue that did not end up passing, that would really, right now we have a hodgepodge of city ordinances throughout the state that, depending on where you happen to have your short-term rental property located, you're subject to a variety of different restrictions on your personal property. And I think from a property rights standpoint, we need to have a consistent uh, uh, protection of those constitutional property rights across the state. So it doesn't matter if you live in one town, or if your property that was in the county got annexed into the city and now all of a sudden it's subject to a bunch of onerous government rules and regulations that it wasn't before, because that city is more restrictive than somewhere else. I think we need to get that done, and hopefully we will over time. But all in all, I would say we had far more victories than any previous session, like I said, since I've been there. Like I said, I think overall the session went incredibly well. I'm excited to see some of these policies as they're implemented. Some of the really opportunities we have in the state going forward. I saw in the paper this morning where it was talking about revenues are coming in above projections once again. And this is after we've reduced tax rates and cut taxes, and then cut them again. If you recall, we had a special session last year to speed up the phase in of some of the tax cuts that had previously passed, but were phased in over time. And we're still going to have a huge surplus. And I think that goes back to the principle that if you want to get less activity, you tax it more. And if you want to get more activity, you tax it less. And when you get more activity, you're going to have greater revenues. I mean, it's just part of the thing. So it's not just a static thing. We're going to cut this rate and we reduce the revenues. We cut the rates, we get more activity, and we get higher revenues. And so I'm thrilled about the economic engine that Arkansas is becoming. I think we have the opportunity to become not only a leader in certain aspects of things, but I think we are becoming a state that is very competitive and attractive to getting investment in our state. I look forward over the next several years with LEARNs being implemented to having that quality of life, place to raise a family, good cost of living, great economic activity for jobs and things like that. We've got abundance of natural resources and good weather, 4 seasons, outdoor activities, all sorts of things that people want to a place where they want to live and call home and raise family, without all the crazy junk that the society in some other states are dealing with. And so I think we're poised to really catapult forward as a state.